Okay, so everybody wants to know, start off with a story about the Arizal. The question everybody asking is, when is Mashiach coming? So of course, we don't know, right? But we do. The only thing we do know for sure is that there is a mitzvah of achak aloi b'chol yom sheyavai, and that should never go away. It's a mitzvah every single day. So if people start saying too much when he's going to come, that they heard from this person, they heard from that person, they lose out on the achak aloi b'chol yom sheyavai, because they get very excited that they know for sure that he's coming, and then sometimes it takes a little longer. But anyways, the Maisa is with the Arizal, that the Arizal had a minig, that if he had a shaila in learning, or in Kabbalah, whatever it was, he would go to the Kevet Tzadikim, he would be mishateach on the Keva, he would lay down on the Keva, and he would make, I guess, kiss the Keva, like to make a neshika, a kiss, and be machlef ruach beruach with the nifter, and that's how we would be mekabel certain oiros from whoever it was. Either he went to Nevi'im or he went to Tanoim. So one of the ones he used to go to was Shmaya ve'Avtalya, and one of the times he went, they asked him, why is he going? And so the Talmidim asked him, and he said, I'm going to daven by the cave of Shmaya ve'Avtalya, to daven that Mashiach ben Yosef should not die. So that was what he sent. So they didn't really know what he's talking about. Who's Mashiach ben Yosef? What's going on? Nobody knows anything that's happening. So, I don't know. I'm only telling you the story that I know. But anyways, there was a ma'aseh that happened that one time in Erev Shabbos, close to Kabbalah Shabbos. So the Arizal had a minute to go out Basadeh to be Makabel Shabbos, and so he went outside the city of Tzfas. He was wearing, the Arizal was wearing what was, I guess, would be called the Big Day Kahuna. He was wearing 4 begadim, which were all white, and he went out. He started saying Mizmah Havu, which is the beginning of the Kabbalah Shabbos, and L'Chadoidi, and he said Mizmah Shili Yom Shabbos, and Hashem Malach. The Grada says here that they were singing it, so I guess maybe that's the Sherish. All of a sudden, Arizal turns around and he says to Talmidim, we should all go to Yerushalayim before Shabbos, and we should spend Shabbos in Yerushalayim. And don't forget, now we're talking about right in the outskirts of Tzfas. Then they didn't have cars. But if you had a car, even today, to go from Tzfas to Yerushalayim is about 3 hours, 2.5, 3 hours. So if you're middle of Kabbalah Shabbos, which is, say, an hour before the Zman, I'll be derech heavy not making it. So he told this to the Talmidim. So some of them said right away, okay, listen to the Rebbe. And some of them said that they have to first go home, because we're going to go and spend Shabbos in Yerushalayim. We won't be home. We have to go home first and tell the wife. So he said that afterwards, he was Megala to Rab Chaim Vital. What happened because of this story? That the Arizal himself was Mashiach ben Yosef, and he was supposed to come. And had the Talmidim said right away, we're going with you, instead of saying we're going to go home to tell the wife, so he would have been able to be Megala himself as Mashiach ben Yosef, and then he would have lived. And because they didn't, so therefore he had to die, and he died shortly after this Maisa, very young. So you asked me about Mashiach ben Yosef, so I told you about Mashiach ben Yosef.
So just to say, because this might happen like now in Shabbos?
I don't know. You want me to make up something? I could, but I don't know. Okay. Now I want to talk a little bit about the parasha. I don't want to go too long. You know that there's a mitzvah para aduma, chukas. So obviously we know why the Torah had to give us a chayk, because if we're not going to get a chayk, we're going to all make terutzim. Why we should be able to find a meira heta for any mitzvah that there is. We'll find a way out of doing it. Therefore, as Rashi says, that therefore the Torah had to make it into a chayk that we have to do it. Right? Now we do know a tam for it. What's the tam that Arizal brings? And is big, why dafka para? Why dafka aduma? Para, as you know, pei reish, is 280, and the gematria of the Oisius Manspach is 280, right? So you take the Manspach, which is, as you know, the end of letters, and then you add the Hey for the 5 letters themselves, which gives you Para, right? And then the Aduma is also Pchinas Din, and what do you do with it? You burn it. And then it went from Para, when you burn something, so you are burning the Sigim, which are being used to feed the Chelek HaTumah. When you burn off all the Sigim, so there's no Tumah left, and that Hey of Para and Hey represents Din, because as you know, Eis Hey is Keneged the Bina, and there's also Keneged the Malchus, which are Din, and it's Mahapech to Aleph, and Aleph is Ahamtokas Hadin, because the first one is Eis Hapela, it represents all kinds of things. It represents the Galgal HaSayv, it represents, we'll call it, the highest Madregas in Chesed. So therefore, when you mahapech the Hey to an Aleph from Para to Efer, so it's Hamtakas Hadin. So we do know a tam for it. And so what are we saying? It's a chayk that there's no tam. So the answer is pashtus, because that the person who's pouring the mei chatas, so he becomes tamei. So it comes a stira. How could the guy who's making everybody tar, he himself should become tamei? Now we learn later on in the parsha, it talks about Be'erish of Miriam, and the Be'erish of Miriam is really a very sussumdika parsha. And to say that Moshe Rabbeinu spoke to the rock, and it's like a guy speaks to his kids and says, I told you to do something and you didn't do it, so what's the next step? You give the kid a patch. So he spoke to the rock and the rock didn't listen, so he took out a stick and he beat the rock. So to say such a thing, and Moshe Rabbeinu borders on kfira, to talk about Moshe Rabbeinu like that. They can't have such a thing. So what's the pshat? So there's a few things. As you know, Mate, and this Mate was written Shem HaMefarish. And on the Shem HaMefarish that's written, as you know, Shem HaMefarish is Shem Ma. That's what's brought on all over. So written on this Mate. So Moshe Rabbeinu did not speak to the Sela because a few things. One of the things was that he was afraid, as the Chiddushei Rim says this, he was afraid that if he would speak to the rock and Klal Yisrael would hear and they wouldn't listen, so it would be a kilkul for Klal Yisrael. So he was Moise Nefesh to do it mitoich Hakah. What does Hakah mean? As you know, it doesn't mean to hit. So, as we know, that up in the upper, in the Gimel Rishonim, the higher Madregas and the Spheres, when there is a yichud, the word that's used is betisha or hakah. So this hakah that we're talking about, that Moshe Rabbeinu did to the Sela, was pshat, that he took the matter and showed to the Sela, the Shem HaMefarish, and that was called a hakah mipchinas yichud, not mipchinas hitting the rock. So therefore, so chas v'sholom to say that Moshe Rabbeinu, I mean, you can't say chas v'sholom because it says in pasuk in the Torah that says that he hit the rock, but it doesn't mean that he did it out of anger because the rock wasn't listening to him, and therefore he was going to punish the rock. It doesn't work. So therefore, we're saying that it was just a hakah, and through the hakah was pshat, what we call a yichud. That was the main chiddush that I wanted to say, that a hakah over here, which shouldn't be a chiddush to really anybody here, because you all know what the other translation of the word hakah is. That was Aleph. And the other thing that I wanted to say, the Torah talks about Adam kiyamas ba'ayel, right? So you have to be meimes hatzmei, which is really not, that's one of the official yeshiva shavarts, right? That you have to kill yourself over the Torah and Memela. So that Rizal brings the pshat, we just saw it a few minutes ago, that it's really that the Bina is always mashpia to the Zah, and for the Bina to go over to the Zah, is pshat, anytime you have an afila in Ruchnius, you have a Yerida in Ruchnius, is called a Misa. Like you see by Shuris HaKelim, by Misas Malachim, so therefore, it's called Adam Ki, that a person is meimis atzmai, b'misha meimis atzmai, the mi is mem yud, and mem yud is matria nun shari bina, and therefore it's the mi shemeimis atzmai leh, that the bina is going down a madrega to the zah. As you see, it's merumas in the nun shari bina. And on that note, it's time for Ma'ariv, and we'll stop.
Yes,